The 2026 World Cup is being hosted by three countries: the United States, Canada, and Mexico. On paper, that sounds like flexibility, redundancy, a tournament designed to be larger, stronger, and more resilient than anything FIFA has organized before. But before a single ball was kicked, one decision exposed a flaw hiding at the center of the entire operation. A World Cup referee was denied entry to the United States, and that was enough to remove him from the tournament completely. Not from American matches, not from matches in one city, from the entire World Cup. The official was Omar Artan, the first Somali referee ever selected for football's biggest stage. He had a valid visa, FIFA accreditation, years of elite experience. Yet after 11 hours of questioning at Miami airport, he was sent home. What followed was far more damaging than an immigration dispute, because the deeper people looked into the story, the more they realized this was not simply a failure at a border checkpoint. It was a failure built into FIFA's own system, a system so centralized that one airport decision could erase a World Cup career in a single day. And once that became clear, the story stopped being about Omar Artan. It became a story about whether FIFA had built the 2026 World Cup far more fragile than anyone realized. Long before he became part of a controversy, Omar Artan represented one of football's most remarkable success stories. Growing up in Somalia, he pursued a profession that rarely receives attention until something goes wrong: refereeing. While players chase headlines and trophies, referees spend years building reputations through consistency, discipline, and trust. Artan climbed every step available to him. Domestic competitions became international assignments. International assignments became continental tournaments. Eventually, he became the first Somali referee to officiate at the Africa Cup of Nations. Then he officiated the CAF Champions League final. Then he was named Africa's Referee of the Year. Each milestone pushed him closer to football's highest level. When FIFA selected him for the 2026 World Cup, the decision wasn't symbolic. It was earned. Out of thousands of officials worldwide, only 52 referees received invitations. FIFA's refereeing department concluded that Omar Artan belonged among the best officials on earth. Yet the organization that trusted him with World Cup matches would soon discover it could not guarantee something far simpler: his arrival. Then the World Cup collided with reality. When Omar Artan landed in Miami, his World Cup was supposed to begin. Instead, it ended. Reports indicate he was questioned for approximately 11 hours after arriving in the United States. Much of that questioning reportedly focused on Al-Shabaab, the militant group operating in Somalia, yet no evidence connected Artan to the organization. He carried valid travel documents. He carried FIFA accreditation. He had already been vetted through football's highest governing body. None of it mattered. The process continued. Hours passed. Then came the decision. Artan was ruled inadmissible and denied entry. Soon afterward, he was placed on a flight out of the country. The image was extraordinary. One of FIFA's World Cup referees sitting on a plane home before the tournament had even begun. For football supporters, the story felt surreal. Not because immigration disputes are unusual, but because this wasn't an ordinary traveler. This was a FIFA official selected for the biggest sporting event on the planet. If someone in that position could disappear from the tournament overnight, what did that say about the tournament itself? But the real shock came after the denial. The expectation was simple: FIFA would intervene. Instead, FIFA explained why it couldn't. Official statements emphasized that immigration decisions belong to host governments. FIFA confirmed Artan would miss the tournament. It confirmed his compensation would remain intact. It confirmed his status would not change. Technically, every statement was accurate, but accuracy wasn't the problem. Perception was. Because millions of football fans suddenly witnessed something they rarely see. FIFA looking powerless. This is the same organization that determines World Cup hosts, controls billions in revenue, and governs the most popular sport on Earth. Yet, when one of its own officials was removed from the competition, FIFA's public position amounted to little more than acceptance. That created an uncomfortable contradiction. If FIFA is powerful enough to select World Cup referees, why is it powerless when one of those referees cannot reach the World Cup? Then observers discovered something even more surprising. This crisis wasn't created solely by immigration policy, it was amplified by FIFA's own design choices. Every referee selected for the tournament was required to report to centralized operational hub in Miami. Training sessions, fitness programs, briefings, match preparation, everything ran through one location. That meant access to the United States wasn't merely useful, it was mandatory. Suddenly, the logic of a three-country World Cup began looking strangely fragile. For years, FIFA promoted the tri-host format as one of the tournament's greatest strengths. If one city faced difficulties, there were dozens of alternatives. If one region encountered problems, operations could continue elsewhere. Redundancy was supposed to be part of the design. Yet the Omar Artan case revealed something very different. Behind the marketing, some of the tournament's most important systems were not distributed at all. They were concentrated, one hub, one country, one point of access. And when that point of access failed, the entire chain failed with it. Imagine if a player qualified for the World Cup but could not join his national team. Because of a logistical bottleneck created by the tournament itself, the story would dominate headlines for weeks. Yet because Omar Artan was a referee rather than a player, the structural weakness received far less attention than it deserved. The issue was never whether immigration authorities had the legal right to make their decision. The issue was whether FIFA had built enough flexibility into a tournament spread across an entire continent. Because resilience is measured by what happens when something goes wrong. And in this case, one denied entry decision proved capable of removing a World Cup official from the competition entirely. That is not merely unfortunate planning, it is a vulnerability. Canada was hosting matches, Mexico was hosting matches, yet neither country could serve as an alternative pathway for one of FIFA's own officials. The system offered no flexibility, no backup route, no contingency plan. What began as an airport story was becoming a management story. Critics questioned why a tournament spread across three nations had concentrated such a vital function inside one, and the more people examined the structure, the harder it became to defend. Then Canada, UEFA, and Somalia did something FIFA never managed to do. Within hours of the controversy gaining attention, reactions began arriving from around the football world. Canadian officials publicly invited Omar Artan to referee matches. In Vancouver and Toronto, UEFA appointed him to the UEFA Super Cup final. African football leaders voiced support. Somalia welcomed him home as a national hero. Suddenly, the story transformed. It was no longer about what had been taken away. It was about who was willing to stand beside him afterward. Canada offered inclusion. UEFA offered opportunity. Somalia offered respect. Each institution found a way to send the same message. Omar Artan belonged at the highest level of football. The contrast with FIFA became impossible to ignore. While others searched for solutions, FIFA remained trapped explaining procedures. While others celebrated the referee, FIFA defended the system. And in the court of public opinion, that distinction mattered enormously. Because leadership is often measured not by who creates success, but by who responds when things go wrong. The Omar Artan story will eventually fade from headlines. Another controversy will emerge. Another tournament will begin. Football always moves forward, but the questions raised by this episode may remain for much longer. What happens when a World Cup hosted by three countries depends entirely on one? What happens when a referee selected by FIFA can be removed from the competition before reaching the competition? And what happens when the institutions outside football appear more capable of protecting football's values than the institution running the tournament itself? Omar Artan has already promised he will reach the next World Cup. Perhaps he will, but FIFA faces a more difficult challenge, rebuilding confidence in a system that suddenly looks far less robust than advertised, because in the end, this was never just a story about a referee. It was a stress test for the entire architecture of World Cup 2026. And for many observers, the results were deeply uncomfortable.